Speaking at the COP26 summit, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said India would aim for net zero carbon emissions by 2070. Today at this forum, we are joined by industry experts to share their point of view on ensuring India's climate ambition for a net zero world. Solar is the key. Let's hear from our experts and understand how far we are from our ambition. I would like to invite Sudheer Singh, editor, ETEnergyworld, the Economic Times, to moderate the discussion. Over to you, Sudheer.
Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to all of you on our platform. I'm Sudheer, and this is a panel discussion on a very important topic, which is how to ensure India's climate agenda and the ambition that we have for a net zero world, and how solar could be the key to achieving that target or that goal. With an eminent set of panelists that we have today, including Mr. Ajay Mathur, he's the DG of ISA, International Solar Alliance. We have with us Mr. Mohit Bhargava, ED, RE, NTPC, and also the CEO of NTPC Renewable Energy Limited. We have Mr. Praveer, CEO and MD of Tata Power. We have Stolp, he's the practice manager for South Asia, Energy and Extractives Global Practice at World Bank. We have Mr. Venu Nuguri, he is the MD and CEO India and South Asia, and also the member of the executive team at Hitachi Energy. We also have finally Srivatsan Iyer, he is the global CEO of Hero Future Energies. And what a really eminent set of panelists that we have today. Let me start this discussion by asking Mr. Mathur to set the context, so to speak, of this entire topic by telling us about what is his overall view on this larger topic of net zero and how solar fits into it. How do you look at India's net zero commitment? What exactly is its meaning, and what kind of a role do you see solar playing in it? Right. So that's very broadly the question. Of course, you have seen a lot of there's been a flurry of activity in the past some time where we have seen a lot of nations and corporates announcing net zero, but there's a lot that needs to be explained there. So yeah, Mr. Mathur, please go ahead.
Sudheer, thank you very much. First of all, it's a delight to be here with you and with this very, very eminent panel, all friends of many years, I would say even partners of many years. We've worked together towards this goal of achieving net zero, and particularly net zero in electricity. And I think I'd like to break up the issue into two parts. One is, say, till 2030, and the second is beyond 2030. Why so? The first thing I want to say is that by 2030, we can be at a point where the tipping point has occurred as far as electricity is concerned. In other words, beyond 2030, it is quite possible that all new investment in energy, in electricity that happens would be for renewable energy, particularly solar. Consequently, it's quite possible that we may meet the various goals of 500 gigawatts by 2030, 50% of electricity requirements, reducing CO2 emissions by 1 million tons, carbon intensity below 45%, all by 2030. All these are possible. But the big thing here is cost-effective storage. I would expect that in the next few years, 2022, 2023, 2024, we should be able to come to a point in India and globally where in many geographies, electricity round the clock from solar and battery storage is cost effective with fossil fuels. Now, so this is very important because no matter where you are, whether you're in India or in the US or wherever, at night, when there is no solar, how will the electricity demand be met? It will have to be met by fossil fuels, whether coal or gas or whatever, unless the price of storage falls to a level where it is cost competitive. Consequently, it is of greatest importance for the globe that we cross this barrier soon. That's number one. The second, if we are able to do it in the next 2-3 years, then by 2030, we should be able to achieve our goals. The second point is beyond 2030. Now, electricity is one energy source. You also have thermal energy. What will happen there? To a large extent, that thermal energy will be replaced by greater electrification. Yes, that's good. And that electrification will occur from solar plus storage. That's also good. But we would need to scale up. But then there will be other applications where electricity just doesn't make sense, either from cost effectiveness point of view or from a temperature point of view. The temperatures required are much too high, more higher than what electricity can do. The only carbon-free source we have is hydrogen. How do you get carbon-free hydrogen? Solar electricity is used to electrolyze water, and that water, the electrolysis of it produces hydrogen, which can then be used everywhere. Now, this means that on the utilization side, for example, for the steel industry, for the for high temperature petrochemical processes, we start using hydrogen. Only then will people start using green hydrogen. That is what is made from solar or other renewables. Cost is a key there. Today, green hydrogen costs about $5.50 a kg, but gray hydrogen made from natural gas costs less than $2 a kg. It is therefore important that in the time till 2030, we are able to reduce the price of electrolyzers so that the price of green hydrogen falls. So the long and the short of it is, yes, it is possible that we can move to net zero, but it will take a lot of both technological and policy interventions for us to reach there.
Okay. Thank you for the initial comment, and no doubt, all of us do understand that it may be a tall task, may look like a tall task, but then of course, if you have the right kind of technology and cost-effective side of it is addressed, then it should not be that big an issue. Let me turn to Mr. Bhargava here. What is your overall view on this topic? How do you look at this commitment that India has made? And what kind of a role do you think solar will play in it?
Thanks, Sudheer. And first of all, thanks for having me here. Of course, net zero is the buzzword. So I think it's good that you actually have a session on this and we're talking about net zero in general. So I'll just like to take off from where Dr. Mathur left off. We could broadly agree on having two parts, one till 2030, which is much more clearer to us, where we have much more concrete plans in place. And then beyond that also, although I believe government is also working on various activities and action plans on how to take things forward. But there's one issue which I think probably needs the attention much more when we talk about net zero. What do we mean by net zero? How do you measure net zero? People have been talking. So we have, the EU talking about 2040, a lot of places, people talking about 2050, China 2060, and we pitched in at 2070. How do you measure that it is net zero? So that is probably one of the most important steps which we need to agree on at international level, which will help us realize that what we are doing will actually lead to a net zero, because there are multiple variables here. Do I actually stop making coal-based plants or using coal-based power? Or do I get into carbon capture and utilization to, offset the effects of the carbon dioxide? Or if I do a deep decarbonization, or I go ahead and put up large solar, as you mentioned, what's the role of solar? So all these things we need to actually work out, and there has to be clear objectivity and transparency on how we achieve that number. So if I say India needs to be net zero by 2070, what are the steps? What is it that we need to do? So that's the first important part probably we need to keep in mind, and which is in itself a very major task, because as the way the COP20 discussions, the COP26 and the earlier COP discussions have happened, we don't seem to agree on anything in most of the cases. So we still have to see any money on the table, which, like I think 10 years ago, it was agreed that there'll be $100 billion. So probably there's nothing as on date on the table. This time our Honorable Prime Minister said $100 billion in this year alone. I think that's a good number to begin with. So we need a lot of funding on the technology side, on the capitals. We need to have the capital which can actually make these things happen. So when we talk about net zero, and again, I'm trying to play here by what is the broad understanding that we need to decarbonize, we need to put in more renewables, we need to actually phase down, that's a new word on the coal part, not phase out, phase down. So if we look at all these things, I do agree quickly that green hydrogen has to play a very, very important role, and green hydrogen can come from solar. Solar has to be one of the most important things. Dr. Mathur referred to the numbers in terms of what's the cost of green hydrogen. Internally, we are actually talking to have, like a $2 benchmark by, say, the next 4 to 5 years, say 2025, 26. That's where we hope to have green hydrogen at less than $2. But to make that happen, there are multiple things which need to come in place. One, of course, is the cost of electrolyzer, as Dr. Mathur referred to. Yes, that's very, very important. The second part, of course, is also the cost of power, because as we know today, in the electrolyzer technologies which we have, 1 kilogram of hydrogen requires anything about around 50 units of electricity. So if I am actually getting electricity at 3 rupees today, so we are already touching 150 rupees in terms of the production cost alone. So we have to ensure that the cost of power, and when we talk about green hydrogen, it has to be solar plus wind and a combination of thereof. So this has to be in a range which does not exceed 2 rupees definitely, and should be probably closer to 1 rupee 50 paisa, 1 rupee 75 paisa on a longer run. That's only when we'll be able to reach this level of $2 hydrogen. To achieve this, of course, the government is doing National Hydrogen Mission, and along with us, a lot of other industry and industry bodies and users have given a lot of their ideas as to how that can happen, how we can reduce the cost of green hydrogen, because green hydrogen will take off only when there is economic sense for the buyer or the user. So that's very important, that we need to reach that threshold. Along with that, we feel that in the overall context, with India's standpoint, we have over 200 gigawatts of coal-based power, another 20 gigawatts of gas-based power. So we need to invest heavily on the CCU. And I'm not talking about CCUS, I'm talking about CCU. And that is where in NTPC, we actually started a pilot of capturing carbon dioxide and use it along with green hydrogen to make green methanol. Now, this is something, this is a pilot project, it's a 2 TPD kind of thing which you started work on at one of our power stations, Vindhyachal. But we feel that this could be a major game changer in how we are looking at the net zero or the decarbonization exercise. So green hydrogen, green ammonia, green methanol. Green methanol, added advantage of CCU, the carbon capture. And we could actually scale it up to use the entire carbon dioxide from a power plant. The other area, of course, in terms of decarbonization from power sector perspective, which we look at is how we can change the fuel. And one of the things I'm sure people have been reading, that we have moved from biomass-based pellets. So that's an important role. We feel that this, again, the government has been pushing it very, very strongly. And at NTPC alone, we are probably the only one who has used biomass-based pellets across the country. But we feel that this is going to be a very important takeoff point for converting our coal-based plants to a renewable coal-based plant. The other point quickly, and probably I'll end off that, is we are also doing waste to energy. And here I'm not talking about converting waste into electric power. I'm talking about converting municipal solid waste into green charcoal, which will again can be fired in a boiler, can be used in any other uses. So this is like torrefied charcoal. And what we have seen in the pilots we have done, that the quality of this charcoal is very good. So that will again help us convert our existing plants also, which will, and this is where I'll probably slightly differ from Dr. Mathur, storage is important, but if we can convert our existing coal-based plants to provide us green storage, not necessarily by moving away fully from coal, but using resources which are turned into renewable sources, then it makes a lot of sense to us. So Sudheer, I'll probably end here and come back again to take more questions.
Sure. Thank you for that great comment. Just one, as a matter of clarification, I just wanted to understand, you're saying we can convert our coal-based capacity into green storage. What exactly do you mean by that?
You see, a coal-based plant is a storage plant as it is, because coal is the storage. So what we are saying is that instead of using coal, which is fossil fuel, if I convert the municipal solid waste into green charcoal or coal, so that's actually green fuel. So it becomes a green plant, it becomes a green power plant for me.
Okay. A lot of really important points, and I'm really tempted to comment upon some things here. But let's move on to Mr. Sinha, Mr. Praveer Sinha. Very quickly, two things, sir, that I want to understand from you. First of all, of course, like we're asking everyone, how do you look at this topic? The topic of net zero, and how a lot of activity has been there in this area. Where does solar fit into this picture? But apart from, so that's one part of it. I also want to understand from you, if you could comment upon some of the things that Mr. Bhargava was saying. He's saying measuring net zero is very important, no doubt about it, so that we have some kind of a global standard where everybody comes on the same footing in terms of measuring where do we stand. Funding, he's also saying that it's all fine, but where is the capital? Do we have any capital on the table? How do we start? These are some of the more difficult knots to look at. So how would you comment on this? Yeah.
Thank you, Sudheer, for having me for the panel discussion. It's a great panel to be part of. Many of the people on the panel, I have worked with them and I respect them a lot. Well, when we talk about the net zero commitment, it actually means net zero. And I don't think we should beat around the bush. We need to do net zero, and there is an opportunity to do net zero. And while India has set a target of 2070 that we will become 100% net zero, I think a real tribute to this country will be that 100 years after independence will be in 2047. And if we can take an interim commitment of saying that 90% of our generation will be non-carbon generation in 2047, or 80%. But I think there is an opportunity to do that. And why do I say this? I think India is blessed. We have more than 300 days of sunshine. It's like oil, which Middle East and many other countries have. No one can take away from this. And whichever part of India you go, you have sunshine. And what does that mean? It means that there is an opportunity and ability to generate electricity everywhere. I think one of the big points most of the time we miss out is that the whole purpose of decarbonization is distributed energy. We do not look at distributed energy, we all look at the big utility scale and then the same transmission system and same distribution system. I think we need to look at it from the perspective that can we empower our customer? Can we allow all our industries, all our commercial establishments, all our domestic consumers to move into rooftop solar? Whether it is rooftop or ground mounted, it doesn't make a difference, but how do we get into the distributed generation? India's capacity, the potential is something like 749 megawatt, 49 gigawatt. I don't know how it was computed, but it's a huge number. It's in somewhere in 700 gigawatt. Similarly, it was computed that India's rooftop potential is something like 100 gigawatt. And I strongly believe that India has that potential of doing 100 gigawatt of rooftop solar. But it requires that we reach out to the people, whether it is in cities or in urban areas. Another area that I feel that we are missing the point is we have 3 crore pump sets, 300 lakh pump sets in this country. 90 lakh pump sets are run on diesel. And the so-called solarized pump sets are only 3 lakhs. The Kusum program is talking of that we will become 38 lakhs in 5 years under the part A, B, C through solar pumps. We still are nearly 50 lakh away from the DG set runs, and huge number, 2.6 crores away from what we have the total. Now, there is no point, and we did a survey of all the villages in India. Most of the villages, the consumption of electricity is 30 kilowatt to 50 kilowatt. There's no point in having large transmission lines and taking supply for pump sets, for residential purpose, for using it in their shops over there, using it for medical shops or anything, grocery store. Now, there is a huge opportunity on decentralized generation, whereby you can go and solarize all the pump sets, all the 3 crore pump sets and whatever comes in future. There's a great opportunity that you go and solarize all the 6 lakh villages. All 6 lakh villages, you can imagine what is the opportunity. In fact, in some of the work that we are doing in the villages, we find that wherever the solarization is taking place, not only the farmers are taking the supply from, because these farmers, while the Saubhagya program has electrified villages, the industrial and commercial establishments over there are still dependent on DG set. So if you provide decentralized generation in the village, not only it electrifies, but it has given actually great employment opportunity to the people over there. The economic activity has happened to a very large extent. Those people who were running their shops only for a few hours, and this is simple, atta chakki, who were not able to run in the evening because they were running it only during daytime, otherwise it's frightfully expensive to run on DG set. They are now running their shops up to 9 o'clock in the night. The simple chai wala who used to close his shop by 5 o'clock is now keeping the chai shop and the samosa shop open till 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock in the night. So I think there is a huge potential which we are not tapping, and if we tap that, the solutions that we are talking of becoming net zero will definitely happen. I also understand that we need some sort of backup power, storage and all that. We've worked on some solutions on this, and we've developed some simulations where how we can meet the power requirement during the day from solar, how we can meet the power requirement through wind in the evening time and till midnight, and then early morning, how we can meet our requirement through hydro plants, and especially those which have storage dams, how we can generate them during those periods to meet the requirement of power. And wherever that is not possible, we can definitely have some storage facilities and all that. This is something which is very doable. We are, as a solution, providing it to a lot of customers that where I'm guaranteeing them 24/7 supply of electricity through a hybrid combination of solar, wind, and storage or hydro. And in some cases, we also do the demand response, whereby we manage the peaking load. We manage the load of the consumer in such a way that they move most of the high capacity or most of the intense loads during the peak period, and during the off peak, it is just the minimal load, or only the critical loads are utilized, and all the non-critical loads are during the period where we are. So I think we have a great opportunity. India can be the front runner and can really bring about a paradigm shift in the way energy can be produced and consumed. In fact, many a times when as planners, I see that everyone is talking about capacity addition. We need to start looking not from the perspective of capacity addition, but from utilization of energy. And if you manage, if you do your designing from utilization and work backwards, that what is the profile of generation I need to do to meet my load or meet my demand, then you will design your generation capability to meet that. And I'll just share with you a simple example. Delhi has a peak of 7,000 megawatt. In summer, 700 megawatt, that is the top 10%, is used for only 100 hours in a year. So you have a supply which is tied up for 700 megawatt for 8760 hours. That is being utilized for 100 hours. That is 1% of the total time which is being utilized. The rest of the time, you have it as a backup, not utilizing it. So I think there is an opportunity to really leapfrog in terms of the way energy can be produced, utilized, and supplied. There is technology available. Earlier, it was only flow of electrons. The digital technology also allows us to have the flow of data. And that is an area that we need to work on. And if we find a good solution, we should scale it up and use it in all locations. So I think for us as a country, net zero is not very difficult. We are blessed with good opportunities of renewable energy. We have a lot of rivers where we have hydro capacity. If we combine this together, this is definitely doable. And I personally feel that much before 2070, we will be able to achieve net zero. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Thanks for the comment, Mr. Sinha. This is very, if I were to analyze this comment, it is very similar to what Mr. Bhargava was talking, in a manner of speaking. You talk about the difficult things first, and then you say that, at a larger level, it's all fine, but then, these are the things that need fixing. So he talked about how, a lot of work needs to be done in distributed, on distributed side, whether it is agricultural pump sets or whether it is rooftop solar, not a lot of progress has happened there. So things need to happen on that front also. A very fine thing to say, and I could not agree more, but let's move on to Simon here. Simon, you have listened to this entire conversation. Apart from your views on the topic and India, how do you look at this topic and its, its importance for India and where does solar fit into it? I also want to understand from you, as somebody who is from the World Bank, as a funding agency, what are the different, ways in which, a funding agency can help us address some of these, issues that have been talked about so far, at least by Mr. Sinha, for example, he's talking about tapping into distributed, right? Mr. Bhargava was talking about, measuring net zero or where exactly is the funding on the table, things like that. How do you look at it? Yeah.
Thanks, Sudheer, and thank you for inviting me to be part of such an esteemed panel. Yes, I have been listening to the discussion so far, and I can't help but agree with everyone that has spoken. Both Ajay, Mohit, and Praveer have all made eminent sense. Of course, they would. I mean, this is a big issue, not just for India, but for the globe. And India's net zero aspirations are of global importance. So it gets a lot of attention. And interestingly, in the run up to COP26, we did some analysis on what it would take for India to get to net zero, what was a reasonable estimate of when India could land at net zero, and what would be the financing requirements to take it there, what would be the overall investment envelope required. And interestingly, and entirely coincidentally, we ended up at about the same point that Prime Minister Modi announced at COP26, that 27 was about the earliest that India could aim for in terms of net zero. And even that represented a very significant and ambitious target. It's doable, but significantly ambitious. And to quantify that ambition, we're looking at an investment of over $6 trillion in all of the technologies that Ajay, Mohit, and Praveer spoke about, and some more, in order to get India to net zero by 2070. Part of the question was also about the role of solar in supporting India's net zero ambitions, and solar will be critical. It already has been critical. And interestingly, the emergence of very strong solar and wind power markets in India has allowed India over the last decade to already decouple its economic development and growth from emissions growth. So as India's energy sector demand, as India's energy demand and its energy sector grows, it no longer grows one-to-one in a relationship with emissions, which is a significant achievement already. But solar isn't everything, and I think all of the other speakers have already addressed this. And as we look across the region, we tend to look at energy transitions across 5 principal pillars. One is building the alternative to fossil fuels and carbon-intensive energy. Solar is obviously central to the alternatives that are on the table, particularly in South Asia, alongside wind. But it's not as simple as building the renewable technologies. Ajay mentioned energy storage, whether it's battery storage or hydro storage or pump hydro. But alongside that, also transmission systems that are more efficient and and better attuned to renewables and the infrequency of supply from renewables. Also, wholesale power markets need to develop, need to operate in real time to support balancing capacity and intermittency, provide system support that renewables will heighten the need for. All of these things go hand in hand, and that's all about building the alternatives. But there are a number of other areas where we're also focused in India and across the region. Firstly, supply side efficiency, and I think this is of particular importance to India. Everyone on the panel is familiar with the high level of indebtedness and the significant technical and commercial losses that India's publicly owned distribution utilities endure. Those technical losses need to be reduced as much as possible, including through smart technology. I think Praveer has spoken about that. The commercial losses also need to be addressed because if they're not addressed, then the affordability of energy transitions becomes questionable. We group that loosely under the concept of supply side efficiency, but there are many and significant hurdles to getting true efficiency within the power sector. Secondly, demand side efficiency, both energy and material efficiency, I think will grow in importance, particularly when it comes to some of the harder to abate sectors. Fourthly, the fourth pillar of our focus really is, and this has come out, industrial and transport energy use. And the analysis we did showed that 2/3 of India's forward emissions from here to 2050 will come from the industrial and transport sectors. These harder to abate sectors is really where the struggle is going to be. A part of that will be through electrification, but as the other speakers have said, high process heat industries, that's not going to be the solution. We're going to have to look at alternative fuels, green hydrogen. We're going to have to look at carbon capture and utilization. And then lastly, ensuring that this transition is just and equitable for all. Because if we don't, then intractable challenges will arise in the face of expanding solar and wind generation. And the bank is already dealing with the government of India on some of these issues, ensuring that the stresses that increasingly bear upon legacy industries, whether they be financial or social, don't become an impediment to change. So if you're naturally retiring a coal power station at the end of its economic life, and you're not replacing it with a coal power station, you're replacing it with solar or wind, that the industry that has grown up to support the development of that coal power sector and service it, and all of the jobs that are hinged to that, are not lost. And that there is a transition also for those that become vulnerable through that. Also, I mentioned that that transition is in part financial, and we're going to have to look at mechanisms, some of them already present around the world, to support a financial transition of some of the legacy industries. So I think we can look at solar as part of the overall picture of meeting net zero aspirations, but it is only part of the picture. We have to look holistically across all of those other things. Indeed, some of the analysis we did in looking at net zero pathways showed that India taps out its potential for solar and wind sometime around 2050 under its current policies, and doesn't have sufficient internal resources to achieve net zero by 2070. It depends on your interpretation of what is an economically viable solar resource at the moment. And I've seen estimates vary from around 1,000 gigawatts up to 2,000, 3,000 gigawatts. But if we rest on something around 1,500 gigawatts, that's not going to be enough to get India to net zero. That raises a couple of other issues of importance around interconnectivity, both regionally and globally. And I think India has been a standard bearer in terms of the proposition of global grids. One sun, one world, one grid is a case in point. And I think when you look at the natural cap on resources, even in a country the scale of India and as well endowed as India, interconnection becomes a significant part of the solution as well. You asked a question about funding. We could spend a whole hour talking about that. My view is this: if you create a natural market, the financing will flow. If the if the technology can operate at a cost point that competes with other technologies, and increasingly we're seeing how to make that happen, how to invest early in a market, both with policy, with concessional funds, with structured finance, to bring technologies down the price curve to the point where they are naturally sustainable in a market, then the financing will come. Right? I mentioned the figure of 6 trillion plus in funding requirements to 2070 for India to meet net zero. My firm belief is that if you structure your entry to the various technology disruptions that will occur over time, understand that at the front end there may need to be some subsidization, whether it's at a policy level, capital subsidization, or it's working with the multilateral development banks to provide concessional financing at the outset, that you can quickly transition beyond that into a natural market where the role of multilaterals such as the World Bank is simply to de-risk, to credit enhance, to continue to support through technical assistance, regulatory assistance, and natural market, and let the financiers do the rest. Let me stop there. Thanks, Sudheer.
Thanks, Simon, for a great comment. But I'm sure there are no more issues left on the table to be touched upon. So Simon has basically looked at every single thing that can, go wrong, or that has to be, taken up when we seriously want to look at this entire issue or the topic, from interconnectivity to just transition to discom losses and whatnot. And that's what is expected of bankers, I would say. But anyway, so let's move on to Venu. Venu, you've been looking at this you've been hearing this entire debate so far. What do you make of it? What do you make of the larger net zero target that India has? And because Hitachi is has a significant presence, the larger space of transmission, etc. From that point of view, if you could give us some sense of, where do we stand in terms of being able to integrate solar with the grid and storage systems to make it happen?
Yeah, thanks, Sudheer. Hello, everybody, and it's great pleasure to be here with the great panelists here, and many of them are our stakeholders. We continue to engage with them in this energy transition. So my perspective is that first of all, when talking about India's ambitions, our ambitious climate and net zero agenda, we all, I think, at least we should be proud of India's ambition to achieve carbon neutrality. And the budget also reinforced my belief further. The budget is talking about the green, budget is talking about the storage, etc., all these things in that. But definitely, we have my panelists before me were also talking about the challenges. And let me just dissect in two ways. The first and the most challenge, we are still a growing economy. We want to be a 5 trillion economy and beyond that. And almost 1.3 billion people, whether they're living in tier 1, tier 2, or rural areas, also need to have access to clean energy. If we take our per capita consumption is far too low, it is definitely growing, but the challenge is speedily meet a growing demand for electricity at every part of the country, affordable and clean for everyone in that. And the second challenge is how to meet this through clean energy sources in line with our commitment to sustainable development goals. As we talked about, yes, we also have decentralized generation. We also have a centralized. The technologies are available to deploy depending upon the situation where we have in that. So I just wanted to quote what Dr. Ajay Mathur was talking about. By 2070 is a commitment for net zero, but in my view, 2030 is having a very ambitious and aggressive commitments we made recently in that. That's what the 4 major commitments which we talked about. India will take its non-fossil energy capacity to 500 gigawatt, or India will meet 50% of energy resources through renewable, or India will reduce the total projected carbon emissions by 1 billion tons, or the other one is India will reduce the carbon intensity by 45%. These are all quite ambitious and aggressive. If we miss this 2030 mark, then we definitely have a challenge to deal with the 2070 in that. The key is that technologies are available. How do we ensure that these technologies are affordable and deployed at a scale. And as some of my previous panelists talked about, this is a problem is not about India, or not about one nation or one organization, right? This is a global problem, and you need to deploy the solutions at the global scale. Whether we are talking about trillions of dollar investments required for these commitments, whether we are talking about access to intelligent technology, the technology is both core technologies as well as digital technologies, because we need to have the digital technologies because the flow of electrons are multi-directional, no more a single directions. You need to know, close to the real-time basis, the flow of the electrons. So you need to have the digital technologies also deployed at the same time. On top of that, overall of our core sectors of the economy and labor force upskilling. It's extremely important that in this changing landscape, all our labor force need to be upskilling to the level what is required to that. This also requires an intense cross collaboration between the stakeholders, between the government, between the government organizations, private sector, and academia. As an overall basis, we need to have this, the technologies are available and affordable at a scale where we can deploy rapidly, taking care of this and that. So my view is, if I can sum it up, is that it is possible. It is possible. It's not only possible, we all have to make it possible, because the intention of this government, or as a matter of fact, any government, to ensure that this planet is sustainable, not only for our generations, but the generations to come, or even generations to come, and live safely. So the commitment is from the government, from the companies like us, to ensure that we also live up, or we also contribute positively to this particular goal, and ensure that we make a clear role in ensuring that the sustainable energy future for all will require a public, a private, and also a wider industry collaborations, and bringing the technology affordable to the scale. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Venu. You're talking about cross stakeholders collaboration. You're talking about using technology at scale to meet this really ambitious target, no doubt. And at the same time, you have to ensure that it's affordable and clean. Thank you for that comment, Venu. Let me come to Srivatsan now and ask him, what is his view on this topic, and how does he look at India's net zero commitment? And of course, being a major player in solar, how does solar fit into it, according to you?
Very good. Thanks, Sudheer, and thanks for inviting me to be on this panel. I think some absolutely wonderful comments by all the panelists. So it's really hard to add anything of substance to what they've said. So perhaps I'll just focus on a couple of points. One is, as we think of net zero, we need to be thinking about, at some point, retiring the current sources of emissions. And I think there's a natural evolution that could happen to that. However, what we've been seeing over the last, I'd say, decade or 2 decades in solar, particularly, and wind as well, is as the costs are dropping exponentially, today solar happens to be cheapest form of new energy generation just about anywhere in the world. And certainly we talked about India being rich in resources in terms of radiation and wind as well in some places. It is actually economically more beneficial and makes more economic sense to build new solar and wind than to build new fossil-based electricity generation. The tipping point, however, will come when the full cost of building new solar or wind, potentially integrated with storage, is lower than the cash cost of current fossil-based generation. And that tipping point is actually pretty close already in the US. And you can start to see early retirement of fossil-based generation in the US. And when that tipping point comes, new solar and wind won't just be for energy incremental growth. New solar and wind will actually be there to remove some of the base load of the fossil generation as well. And I think that's going to be when this whole process accelerates. So we tend to think of the energy transition, or I like to think of it as the energy disruption, working in a linear fashion. I actually think it's going to be exponentially once you get to the tipping point. And you could potentially reach the goal of net zero substantially quicker than 2070. However, here's where I'd potentially like to point out one thing. From an Indian context, certainly from any country in the world, but specifically India, what we really need to help this tipping point to enable this transition is policy uniformity and consistency. And I think that's something that, given electricity is a complicated topic in India with states and the central government weighing in, what we are seeing is, I'd say, a lack of a comprehensive or uniform policy framework. I think Praveer mentioned, look, distributed solar is one thing, but we are seeing just about every state in India actively discourage distributed solar in one policy fashion or the other. We are trying to see solar be the lowest cost of energy, and I talked about the tipping point. It's hard to get to the tipping point when the government adds layers and layers of cost onto traditional solar generation, right? Whether it be BCD, whether it be GST, other types of tariff or non-tariff barriers, right? So there appears to be, I'd say, I'd hate to say cross purposes, but there's not a uniform policy consistency that says, if we're going to get there, if we're going to actually get to a net zero, remove sources of emission, rapidly scale up, and Venu mentioned, how do you rapidly scale up these technologies, available technologies? I think what we're really looking for is some uniform policy that's actually consistent over a period of time that allows even funding agencies to come in and say, look, we are comfortable that these policies are going to be in place for a decade or 2 decades, and we're comfortable funding these. And Simon talked about the single most important topic for all of us generators, which is the policy needs to take into account how the discoms are financially viable. At this point, the debt burden that they have is unsustainable. It's a question of when this bubble is going to pop and what are the implications, right? Is that money actually recoverable at some point or not? Because that is, even today, we notice slowing down investment in the sector because of the huge uncertainties in terms of the viabilities of the discoms in India. So let me stop there. I know panelists have made some fantastic comments, but I just wanted to highlight these couple of points.
Thanks, Sri. And I knew something like this will come from you. You have a habit of touching the difficult chords. BCD, I'm sure somebody in the panel would have had to mention it. No doubt, a very important point, right? From the point of view of how investors look at a certain geography. All of these things go into that play. So a very valid point, no doubt about it. And you're also talking about the tipping point. We'll discuss it again when we come to you. Mr. Sinha, how do you think so when you were commenting last upon this topic you were talking about, you slightly touched upon the topic of having the storage plus transmission system ready for this. Do you think that the current state of the Indian power system, the current state in which it is it ready for the kind of uptake of renewable power that we're talking about at the scale required, for meeting the kind of really ambitious net zero targets that we have?
So we did some numbers, typically in terms of what is the capacity addition that is required in next 9 years. And let's look at the short term or a medium term 9-year period. And the investment that is required to add the 350 gigawatt. Right now, we are 150 gigawatt of non-carbon, 46 gigawatt of wind, and about 105 gigawatt of renewable. So we need to add 350 gigawatt in 9 years. And we need something like 2 lakh crores of investment in that. And we need another 2 lakh crores for the transmission. Now that's a huge investment that is required, and we need not only people to invest from India, but invest from outside. And part of it will be equity, part of it is debt. And if you need to do that, you need to have a counterparty guarantee. And the counterparty which is there has a loss. So the cumulative losses of all the discounts put together is something like 5,30,000 crores. And the present difference between the average cost of supply and the average revenue is 60 paisa. We, in our country, supply something like 1.2 trillion. So that means every year, another 70,000 crores of loss gets added. To that, you add the carrying cost of the cumulative losses, which has to be funded. And that's another maybe 50,000 crores. Now you have a bleeding counterpart, and until and unless that is set right, it is very difficult for anyone to come and invest, whether they are lenders, they are international global equity funds, they are Indian private equity, Indian promoters, developers. So I think what is important is that we need to set the things right. The various reforms that the government has been talking of, that needs to happen. I think Srivatsan mentioned about the policy decision. Consistency in policies have to be there. It cannot be that all the 28 states and 8 union territories have separate set of policies, notwithstanding the fact that Government of India has told them about certain regulations or certain policies which needs to be followed. The RPO obligation which is there, which today is 20%, and most of the time it is not being implemented, has to be religiously implemented. The penalties that are there, which needs to be done, has to be done. The tariff fixation and enforcement of contracts and orders, which is to be done by the regulators, has to happen. So I think there are a lot of things. While theoretically this is a number which is definitely possible, in practice it needs to gather all these stakeholders, and this has to be done yesterday. This cannot be done today or tomorrow. And if we have to be really serious about the type of capacity addition, and we really have to invest, there has to be a lot of more seriousness that needs to be demonstrated, and more so by the state government and the state discom. So I think while everyone is committed to it, in brass tacks, a lot of things needs to be done to give the comfort to people that yes, this is achievable. Otherwise, in theory, this is something which is definitely doable. We know that we have the wherewithal, resources, many of the initiatives that the government has taken, whether it is the PLI or the manufacturing facilities, and is in the right direction. It's actually supporting. And we have seen that the entrepreneurship is there in India to go ahead and do. Every bid that we see, it is the most competitive bids, and you have n number of players who are coming, new and existing. And I think this is a doable thing, but it requires a lot of focus, a lot of coordination, a lot of cooperation between the partners, and then only I think we'll be able to really fructify the dreams that we have. So I'll pause over here.
Thank you. Thank you. No doubt, the importance of having to address this issue of discount losses, and 5.3 lakh crore is a huge number, right? It's a very scary number, particularly for a poor country like ours. So the importance is there, and we can never overemphasize upon that. And it's a fact that every single positive, motivated discussion on electricity sector in this country ultimately comes back to that, that problem that we've had for so long. Anyway, moving on to our chain of speakers, Mr. Mathur, I wanted to understand from you. Can you share for us, a glimpse of the work which has been done by us in the past some time in this area of solar power development, not just India but globally, and what are some of the top 2 or 3, very briefly, if you could share with us some of the top goals that we're trying to achieve, and what exactly is this? Where do we stand in terms of that resource mobilization target that we had of $1 trillion? So what exactly is happening?
Sudheer, I think the context has been set that solar will be at the heart of the energy transition. Yes, there will be other renewables, but to a very large extent, the countries, particularly the countries in the tropics, will see this at the heart of the transition. And we believe that the transition will occur because solar enables energy access, it enables energy security, and it helps in the energy transition for a variety of different reasons, which my colleagues have spoken, which includes the fact that solar today provides the cheapest form of electricity, but only when the sun is shining. It provides carbon-free electricity. It also helps in reducing urban pollution. It reduces energy imports. It creates new jobs. In other words, it's very much here and now benefits that are pushing the transition towards solar electricity. We are working with a number of our member countries in Africa, Asia, Latin America to enable solar to find a place in the energy transition. Indeed, use solar as the lever to enable the energy transition. We have received till now requests for about 3 gigawatts of solar parks from 11 member countries, and 2.3 gigawatts is already under development, and Mohit and NTPC are strong partners in enabling this through PMCs, and who knows, they may also participate in setting up some of these facilities. We are also working on the deployment of solar pumps in these countries, because that's again something which enhances productivity. It means that long lines and the investment that is required is not needed. We have, through the IPSA Trust Fund and a GGEI, the Global Green Growth Institute of Korea, and ISA, created a demand through which we are meeting the first lot of solar pumps. The total demand that we have created is about 272,000 solar pumps. We are inviting tenders for small-scale demonstration projects of about $50,000 each. These are grants that are funded by ISA in the least developed countries, in these small island developing states. And at COP26 last, we linked up with significant players in the clean energy and climate change space, including the Global Energy Alliance that has been set up by the Rockefeller Foundation, the IKEA Foundation, and the Bezos Foundation as a means for enabling project development in countries where money does not flow, solar investment money does not flow, or if it flows at very high interest rates. The second thing that we realize is that apart from money, one of the major problems in most countries is local capacity. And consequently, the fifth batch of the training program for bankers that ISA helped curate was recently completed. We also are helping our member countries in building up high-level technical capacity by sending fellows, as we call them, the ISA fellows, to do a master's in solar technology at IIT Delhi. The third such batch has just started. We at ISA continue to be guided by a philosophy that we call towards 1,000. Why 1,000? Because we are looking at mobilizing $1,000 billion of solar investment. You refer to it when you talk about $1 trillion, $1,000 billion. Second, we are looking at unleashing a transition which enables 1,000 gigawatts of solar generation capacity in our member countries by 2030. Third, it's not just that this is created, it's that it helps the bottom of the pyramid, the 1,000 million people at the bottom of the pyramid in our member countries to have access to clean energy by 2030. And fourth, in this process, we reduce annual carbon emissions by about 1,000 million tons. So all of these things together guide ISA's role. So to repeat, what are we looking at? We are looking at member countries going through the energy transition to meet their own development needs through solar, focusing particularly on the least developed countries and the small island developing countries. Second, across all countries who are members, developing focus on analytics, advocacy, and capacity building. Why? Because at the end of the day, they have to be ready not only to do one demo project, but to do a second, to do a fifth, to do 100, and therefore attract capacity, attract investment, have the capability to develop these projects, have the capability to deliver on these projects. And finally, all of this is focused on, as Simon and others are focused on finance being available. And therefore, the various instruments into place help facilitate, with Simon and other colleagues in the multilateral development banks, availability of finance at rates which are acceptable in those countries. Not that the entire risk of investing in solar in these countries falls on the country themselves. So these are some of the things, as you said, it's a glimpse of where we are. Our emphasis in building up that $1 trillion that you spoke about, Sudheer, is to focus on the demand side. Where will this money go? We have a fair idea where it will come from. What are the kinds of things that are needed? And for the lack of a better word, I would like to say 3 buckets. One, of course, is the investment bucket. But the second is, in order to make people invest, you need risk mitigation. That's the second bucket. It's when investors are sure that they'll get their money back, that they will invest. And the third is, you're not going to do all of that much for one project. You'll do it because you know there'll be a second project, a fifth project, and 100th project. In other words, the readiness, the capacity building to do this. So we are looking, therefore, at countries and looking at 3 buckets on how they can absorb the $1 trillion. Thanks, Sudheer.
Sure. Thanks for that comment, Mr. Mathur. So that's a lot of plan and a lot of ambition there on the part of ISA. Let me ask you, Mr. Bhargava, from the point of view of NTPC, what is the company's larger plan when it comes to development of solar, and both in terms of capacity, investments that we are planning, and where do we stand as against those targets, and what are some of the largest hurdles that you see, in that entire growth strategy, whether it is regulations or financing, market development, equipment, tech? What exactly? How do you make sense of those hurdles? Yeah.
I think you asked a lot of number of points there, Sudheer, so I'm not sure that I'll be able to cover all of them. But yes, in terms of targets, you see, on a very broad scale, our aim, and for NTPC, this is actually part of the larger energy transition. So when we are setting for ourselves targets, what we decided was that in the next 10 years or so, we should potentially have a renewable capacity which is at least as big in size as we have the thermal capacity today. So in pure number terms, by 2032, we plan to have 60 gigawatts of renewable capacity. But of course, like all the plans, these numbers can always be reviewed at the end of another 2 or 3 years, depending on how we're actually moving forward and if we need to further press the accelerator. So that can be done. Out of this 60 gigawatts, solar will play a larger role, and for no other reason but the fact that in India, solar is still the lowest cost power. And I think Mr. Iyer also mentioned that it remains the cheapest source of electricity in the country. And the various auctions have been throwing up these numbers. So we are at around 2 rupees number already, 2 rupees 10 paisa. 1 rupee 99 was actually the breakthrough number which we bid about a year ago for Gujarat. So solar will play definitely, although I may not be able to give an exact distribution between solar and wind, but solar will be much larger as compared to wind. But that doesn't mean wind is will not be there, because wind will become essential as we're also looking at more and more round-the-clock offerings which we're looking at. And that is where the role of wind becomes very, very critical, because today, I think this was a point made earlier by Dr. Mathur as well, that storage costs overall are pretty high. So if we have to make a competitive offer with round-the-clock power based fully on renewable energy sources, so we need to have solar, we need to have wind, and then of course we need to plug the balance gap using the storage capacity. And in fact, what we have done recently is that we've actually come out with a tender for 3,000 megawatt hour of storage capacity, which I would reckon is the largest probably in India, definitely, but I don't know whether globally also this is one of the largest number or not. Maybe, maybe not, but I'll not stick my neck out on that. So the idea here is that a lot of this capacity which we are going to bid out is going to be used for providing round-the-clock solutions or solutions to other industrial customers also, who might be keen to have or keen to transition to a more RE-based strategy. So those are the broad numbers in terms of 60 gigawatt. What we already have today is a pipeline in which about 7.5 gigawatts, which we are already working on. And we also have acquired land for another 5 gigawatts, which number will increase dramatically over the next few months, because we are in discussions with various states to actually increase that number substantially. And I'd like to thank Dr. Mathur. You already mentioned about the role NTPC is playing along with ISA. So 2.3 gigawatts is what the number which we are providing in terms of PMC services. And I'm sure this number will keep on increasing, because we have started work on that. Initial groundwork at the initial projects has already started happening. So as things move forward, I'm sure this is going to be a major play also for NTPC. But when I talk about renewables, probably the point I mentioned earlier also, so it's not just the renewables capacity which is going to happen. We are looking at storage, we are looking at CCU, we are looking at green hydrogen. And which is where I mentioned that 60 gigawatt may actually change, because the more and more applications for green hydrogen come on course, this number will actually become totally different. The other part probably is also in terms of challenges. The challenges are many, and Mr. Iyer actually touched upon a few of those. But I have a slightly different take. I'm not saying I don't agree with him. These are things obviously happening in an environment in which we are operating. And incidentally, all the solar power or the renewable power producers who are in the field today are facing these issues. So whether BCD or GST and also GIB, I think that's another issue which we are all facing. So, but then, I mean, I would say that this is part and parcel of how the things develop. I mean, we actually cannot expect that things will be so hunky-dory that nothing's going to change. So the issues are this, plus issues are in terms of supply, for example. So while PLI scheme has been a really strong initiative by the government, but when will the domestic manufacturing be able to plug the gap, which we see the Chinese module manufacturers going away and the kind of costs that are going to be imposed on them? So that's another challenge we have, because whatever number we talk about, if we do not have the right capacity to meet that requirement. So if we look at a 500 gigawatt number by 2030, which is what the government stated objective is, we are talking about 40 to 50 gigawatts annually. And even if I assume, say, 30 gigawatt coming from solar or whatever, so do we have a 30 gigawatt capacity domestically available to meet that requirement? No, it will probably happen 2 years down the line, basis what the applications were in PLI, which of course the number has been increased post the allocation further by the finance minister. But that will happen 2 years down the line. So we are kind of in a situation where the developers are not only hamstrung by BCD and GST, they're also facing up to a market which is controlled by the demand available and the supply available. So the prices of modules on which we bid, say, 1 year ago, are through the roof now. So that's another challenge we have. Similarly, availability of land, availability of connectivity. But one of the things which I feel has got undue traction and which I feel probably we need to look at it in a totally different manner. And this was partly touched upon again earlier by one of the panelists, is the DISCOM dues. Yes, it is huge. But we need to realize DISCOMs are not the only source of selling power. On one hand, we talk about the markets. On the other hand, we start talking about DISCOMs. So where we want to go? We want to have the cake and eat it too. I mean, okay, that's the best thing that can happen to any industry. But probably we also need to realize that these are challenges which will keep on happening. So if the DISCOM dues are high, and probably one of the things which probably wasn't mentioned was also that PPAs are not happening. So offtake of solar, development of wind is today totally hinged on how we are looking at DISCOM signing on the PPAs. They have a strong issue in signing PPAs, adding to the liabilities, already huge liabilities. So can we look at propositions which do not require PPAs? And that is where, for example, one of the schemes which government came out with for flexibility in supply of power from thermal power stations, where they have allowed the generating companies to actually blend or bundle the solar power to replace the thermal power. So the idea is not to get stuck on PPAs, not to get hung on PPAs, but to keep moving. And that is why at NTPC, we are quite conscious that our focus is not just winning bids. we will keep on participating in the bids and try to win them to the best of our capabilities. And we have got a reasonably good record up till now in the last 1.5 to 2 years or so. But that is not the only way to go. We need to look at various other options, and these could be non-PPA based options also, whereby what we're trying to do, we are not only focused on DISCOM revival, which has to happen. I'm not denying that, which definitely needs to happen. But why do we burden them further with more PPAs, which probably they need partly or may not need as per their assessment? So that's the other thing. And lastly, I'll just touch upon one thing which Simon said, and that's which is really close to what NTPC is looking, is just transition. Because when we are moving away from coal-based power to renewable power, and for us, just transition is not just about jobs, it's about the socioeconomic impact, how those people, and there have been now reports coming, and in fact, I think one of the agencies also done a lot of work in Chhattisgarh, and we will be looking at that report as well. So we are quite keen that whenever we transition from coal-based to renewable, or if we are trying to replace the existing coal-based plants to any other thing, so we probably need not only to repurpose the land to make it useful for whoever is there, but we also need to ensure that we are providing the right skill set, and which is where NTPC has actually invested in a lot of ITIs and development of all these institutes along with the state governments, so that the upskilling of the people keeps on happening, because we can't leave them dependent on coal-based power, which we all know probably not today, but 20 years hence or 30 years hence is going to go away. So just transition is something. And probably one of the things I want to leave with this panel, which is a very August panel, probably what we have not spoken so far, and which probably we need to start discussing, is how do we take care of end of life of solar plants? Because everyone is quite busy doing all these gigawatts and gigawatts of solar, and we are very happy announcing those numbers. What happens 20 years down the line? How do we take care of the panels which are done with? What do we do? So what I'll suggest, and this is something I don't have an answer to. I'm sure Simon is here, and they could probably engage with a lot of other people, and they could probably engage with us also. We need to develop how to take care of the residual or the trash, which ultimately leaves us. We are left with at the end of 20-25 years, and what to do with it. Whether we can reutilize it, whether we can repurpose it, whether we can recycle it, definitely. So that's the point I wanted to end with. Thank you, Sudheer.
Thank you, Mr. Bhargava. A lot of fresh perspective there, no doubt. And I would invite Simon to comment upon these two things to begin with. First of all, he's saying that DISCOMs is no doubt it's an issue, but then there is a way out, which is to replace the existing. When you go on replacing the existing PPAs with renewables, etc. The other is, of course, it's a very important point about what happens 20 years down the line when we will be saddled with a lot of these waste, so to speak. How do we manage that? So Simon, if you can comment upon that, and also maybe if you can brief us very briefly about the bank's own activities when it comes to solar in India. Yeah.
Thanks, Sudheer. Yeah, look, I completely agree with Mohit on the alternatives to continuing down the path of long-term PPAs on a bilateral basis with already indebted, already commercially struggling DISCOMs. And Mohit hinted to the evolution of the wholesale power market and a much greater merchant dimension to it as we move forward. That doesn't address the fundamental issues that India has within its utility sector. I mean, those distribution utilities will still struggle to pay, whether they're paying through a spot price in a pool or on the basis of a long-term PPA. But it does spread the burden a little bit. And I think just as importantly, plays into a more liquid market that supports energy transitions from a technological perspective. It not only broadens the commercial scope of the market as we shift to merchant trade and real-time trade, but it also supports the technology, balancing capacity, ancillary services, etc. So I wholeheartedly agree that that's a solution that has to come. It's not a matter of if, I think it's a matter of when, and India is already moving its wholesale markets in this direction, not just within India, but also regionally. And again, this raises the importance of interconnectivity we recently saw trade of Nepalese hydropower on the Indian exchange. And I think that sort of trade also will support India in its ambitions for energy transitions. I agree with Mohit, end of life of solar plants is something that we need to consider now. And I think as we start developing these roadmaps to net zero, they have to be comprehensive to that extent. It's not just build it and then move on. We'll build it. There's a legacy in place now. And I think that reflects also on the coal sector. You asked about the bank's role. Our role has changed, I think, over the past decade. We're no longer just a sovereign lender of last recourse. We work with governments to build markets that are commercial and bankable. And less you will see the World Bank financing a 500 megawatt project in the Indian context. That means nothing. It's a drop in the ocean. Rather, we'd like to use our resources to support market development and much more significantly leverage those resources. And I think we'll do that selectively. In very simplistic terms, I see energy transitions being a series of technology disruptions, and we'll enter markets where they're struggling, where they need support. One example in the solar space was the solar rooftop market in India, which was reasonably stagnant, very high interest rates, not a lot of understanding of the technology or commercial risk from financiers in that market in India, in a commercial and industrial sector where the business case was robust and sound. And we worked with the government, with State Bank of India, to bring a highly discounted financing product to the market, to kickstart that market, get other bankers used to the technology, used to the business models. And what we saw was that interest rates for solar rooftops came down across the board from somewhere around 14–15% about 5–6 years ago now to, I don't know what they are exactly now, but around 8.5–9% a year or two back, and a very significant expansion in that market, in part as a result of that financing structure, but also because we supported the government in interventions on net metering regulations, on one-stop portals for approvals for commercial and industrial solar rooftop. So interventions of that nature. If you look at battery storage, we're preparing something very similar for the government to support the introduction of that technology, still at a point in the cost curve where even when you stack values in the ways that we've learned to do for battery storage, it's hard to build enough of a revenue base to meet the cost at the moment and hurdle rates for investment. So some concessionality at the front end, building business cases which really do maximize the value propositions from battery storage wherever they lay, whether it's infrastructure deferment or it's deviation settlement penalties being deferred, whatever it is, building the revenue stream so that you've got an economic case for battery storage, and then supporting that with financing. Then as the markets mature, moving into a phase where we're continuing to de-risk, whether it's through credit enhancement, to keep financing costs affordable and to play into those financing flows. Around this concept of just transitions that Mohit brought us back to, I think I also want to go back to Sri's comment on the tipping point. I really like the concept that once we get that overall cost package to the point where it's competitive, truly competitive with fossil fuels, we'll not just see a build out of renewables as the preferred choice, but we'll also see it eat into some of the legacy systems. One of the significant impediments to that, obviously, is financial lock-in in technologies that are already in place in India. And I think there will be a point where we're having to consider, alongside government and with international support, how to unlock some of that financial lock-in so that we can support just transitions from the socio-economic perspective that Mohit raised, but also from a financial perspective, and making sure that the losers don't lose so significantly that they create impediments to that. We're seeing very similar models arise in Germany, in Australia, in the US, that are starting to grapple with some of these lock-in issues. That's where I also see a role for the multilaterals, and and particularly in their ability to mobilize climate investment funds, concessional funds that play into market capitalization, and then support for retirement and just transitions, reskilling, all of those issues.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Simon. Let me, turn to Venu here. And Venu, when you were talking about, when you were giving your earlier comment, you had a focus on technology, and Hitachi is a technology company in many ways. So, what are the different ways in which Hitachi's own profile and growth plans, kind of support this larger climate agenda that we're talking about here? If you could, shed some light on that, and maybe share a brief update of what are the key highlights of the different projects and their update. If you could share that for us. Yeah.
So thank you, Sudheer. As you know, Hitachi Energy, earlier we were part of ABB Power Grids. So we have been in the business last more than 100 years. So we are continuously bringing the technology. We really look at our technology. Our technology is the bridge between the generation and the consumption. With our technology, we can enable the generation connected to the grids. Our technology will enable transmitting of the high power, ultra high voltage, or any voltages of that sort. And our technology also enables the distribution of the power. And our technologies also enable the consumption, whether it is the consumption of the industrial side or the consumption at new forms of load, such as electrical vehicles or the data center, so on and so forth. Since we are in this business of providing a mission critical technology, what we have done at Hitachi Energy, and we kept sustainability as a purpose, center of our strategy. And we are enabling a sustainable energy future for all of our stakeholders, whether they are utilities, industries, and infrastructure. And also, as we are providing this technology, we also want to do the walk the talk. So what we have done as a global organization, we are headquartered in Switzerland, in Zurich. So we have announced our own carbon neutral strategy at a global level. So we operate around close to 100 countries, and we have more than 150 factories spread over 100 countries. So we said by 2030, we want to be carbon neutral in our own operations to start with. So as a first target, we said by end of this fiscal year, we want to, all our factories all over the world shall be powered through fossil-free electricity. We have already achieved last week, including in India, all our factories. We have 16 manufacturing factories in India, and it's all being powered through fossil-free electricity in that. So that's very the thing. And when it comes to the India renewable, we believe that solar will be like is like a king of clean energy, right? Because of its intrinsic characteristic, and as Dr. Mathur has talked about, because the solar is available all over the country, and the technology is getting more and more mature, and also the technology is becoming affordable, and we are able to deploy at a scale both in terms of the size as well as also in terms of the time wise in that. So all of our, really, if you look at our technologies also, take for example our HVDC technologies enable integration of the large scale renewable, be it the solar or it's the wind. So the idea of this kind of technologies, the grid will become more stronger, are able to withstand these kind of unforeseen changes will happen. We don't know when it comes to renewable, we don't know when the sun shines or the wind blows. So your grid needs to take care of these kind of absorptions and challenges and intermittencies. Our technologies will enable that. We are the maybe first company here in India to enable the one of that time around 5-6 years back, one of the largest solar plant in a single location, that's called the Kaumudi 648 megawatt. We did the automation of the plant, and we did the grid connection of those kind of plants in that. And we are constructed a HVDC project from northeast to Agra over a distance of 1,800 kilometers, enabling the renewable power coming from northeast to Agra. We recently commissioned one more project of HVDC from Raigad to Pugalur, and the beauty of this technology is it's very flexible, right? And at the time of the construction of the thing, or at the time of the conceiving of this project, our customer wanted to send the power from Raigad to Pugalur, but by the time it's constructed, there is a wind generation available in the southern part. And today, this project is able to transmit the power from Pugalur to Raigad back. Clean energy is being transmitted in that. So these are the technologies where Hitachi is pioneering and continue to bring that. As I said at the last point, as we are running out of time, sustainability is center of our core strategy, right? Some of our equipment, we do use SF6 gas. We have already seen this, and we have now come out with an alternative to SF6 gas, so that our technology also use the clean and in whatever we are talking about, right? In the gases are also is very environmentally gases in that. So that's why almost all of our technologies and looking at various both in our own operations as well as with our stakeholders, we are promoting the sustainable energy future. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Venu. Thanks for the great comment, and thanks for the informing us about all those great plans and technology from a technology perspective. Srivatsan, you are the last man to comment. You are going to be the last man to comment here as far as this discussion is concerned. You've talked about BCD already, and I was in fact planning to take more of your views there. In terms of how do you see the future of solar power equipment manufacturing panning out, as far as things like domestic versus import duty and all those things are concerned. What is the way ahead? How do you see things evolving, firstly? And from Hero Future Energy's own point of view, what exactly is the focus when you look at the company's plans for growth in the solar power sector and a larger energy transition, of course? Yeah.
Very good. So thanks. Given we are running short of time, I'll try and keep it real brief, Sudheer. So first is, I think, like everybody else in India, we are fairly enthused by the recent budget that increased the PLI outlay for solar module manufacturing. And I think Mohit made a very good point today that says, look, we need to add about 40, 50, 30, 40 megawatts of solar at least a year. And if you take distributed manufacturing, potentially more than that. Our domestic capacity is not there yet, right? There's two things, right? One is to add the capacity to meet that, because in light of ALMM and other non-tariff barriers, the domestic capacity has to emerge. But it's critical, and we really look forward to the domestic capacity emerging along three dimensions, right? It needs to have integration. And I think the last PLI scheme for solar module was good to see that the players were all the way backward integrated, because I think that's critical. The second is scale, because that leads to lower costs. So we don't want, let's say, what I call these micro plants coming up because they don't have the necessary economics of scale to reduce the cost of the solar modules. But the third important one that I hope the sector starts to invest in is technology. You can set up, I'd say, multi-gigawatt lines of solar modules. Unfortunately, the risk of obsolescence is pretty high for these guys, right? And so the sector needs to constantly invest in new technology for higher efficiency, larger format modules all the time. And this is what other countries that have been in this business for a long time continue to do. So India certainly has a little bit of catching up to do. And so I think we really look forward to the industry focusing on integration, on scale, and on technology. Segueing into what Hero Future Energy is doing, really we're focusing on clean tech at this point, right? And if you look at really the three sources of primary energy, one is electricity generation. The third is energy for industrial uses, and the last is energy for transportation or mobility, right? And I think we see a critical role for renewables in all of these, and certainly we are already in the business of solar and wind and hybrid for the electricity markets. We are actively looking at green hydrogen, and so really the cost of renewable energy is going to be the critical driver of green hydrogen going forward to see whether it actually can compete with traditional forms of fuel used for heat in the industrial sector or traditional forms of liquid fuels that are used in the transportation sector. And so we look forward to a drop in cost of renewable energy. Today we are at 2 rupees, and I think Mohit mentioned that for green hydrogen to be competitive, that cost needs to drop by a factor of 2 at least. And so we are looking and working with other partners to look at green hydrogen, to supply energy in the industrial sector as an alternative to current fuels that they're using, And lastly, looking at green hydrogen in the transportation mobility sector as well. Because I think in the end, renewables, whether it's electric or whether it's green hydrogen, is going to play a critical role in decarbonizing all these three sectors of energy consumption. So I'll end there, Sudheer. So I hope that kind of gives a flavor of what we're working on.
Yeah, sure. It does. It definitely does. With that, I think we can close this discussion. We have a lot of really important points, and all of these points are so interesting and important that we can have separate discussions on them. But then let me try and say that some really important points came up. How do you measure net zero? What is the way ahead when it comes to cost-effective storage? We also had topics like distributed energy being talked about. Mr. Sinha talked about distributed energy, and he went on to say that distributed is the future of decarbonization, right? And a lot of people talked about a lot of different issues, specific issues that need addressing, whether it is rooftop systems, whether it is pump sets, whether it is discoms, etc., market development. A lot of things need to fit right into the puzzle for it to make sense. That's my key takeaway from this discussion, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your time, and please carry on. And we really look forward to hosting you again on this platform. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, everyone, for putting such valid points. Truly, it was a detailed and insightful discussion. Dear viewers, a quick reminder to explore the expo area for all the useful assets shared by our partners. Now we'll move to the next session. Stay tuned.